was thinking about this. Where has the last 5 years gone? Now, yesterday itself was 5 years ago that the UK left the European Union. I remember it very vividly, of course. We carried the Union flag out of the European Parliament. I actually remember doing an interview in this very studio when I came back to the United Kingdom. And then we left yesterday at midnight. I remember I was in Parliament Square. We had a huge party with Nigel, with various other people. And, of course, we severed those political ties that we'd held for 47 years. Now, you may remember, of course, we stayed in the EU Single Market and Customs Union for a further 11 months. And then, of course, the rest is history. And the reason I want to talk about it is because there were two articles which were written in the Telegraph, one by David Frost and one by Nigel Farage. I will just give you the headlines because it shows you sort of differing opinions. David Frost says Brexit wasn't a failure. It liberated us from the declining dictatorial EU. He goes through that, various points that he makes to try and support his argument. And then Nigel Farage says 5 years on, we still haven't taken back control. Let's get it done. Very much on the offensive. And of course, this was all about taking back control of our money, our laws and our borders. The question is, how much of a Brexit have we really achieved? I'm absolutely delighted that I'm joined now by Sir Gerald Howarth, who's a former Conservative Member of Parliament and a Defence Minister. Also, more pertinently, he was on the board of Leave Means Leave. Good morning, Gerald.
Well, good morning, Dr. David. How are you?
I'm very well indeed, thank you. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and we should be, I suppose, celebrating 5 years of Brexit, but we really haven't Brexited properly.
Well, first and foremost, David, we should be celebrating Brexit, and we should remember, as you will have read in Lord Frost's, David Frost's article in the Daily Telegraph yesterday, he reminded us of the things we have got out of. I was a defence minister. I sat round that table. True, I had a veto. My colleagues in other departments had no veto. So Britain had to give up things that it didn't want to give up in order to protect things that even more did not want to give up. So we've ended all that wrangling. We've ended having to support, for example, support Ireland when they had needed a bailout from the Eurozone.
The Republic, yeah.
The Republic of Ireland, we gave them lent them £3.5 billion, and of course got absolutely no thanks for it. We've been freed in foreign policy terms. We don't have to pay £20 billion a year to their budget. We can make our own laws about vaccines. We can make our own laws about VAT. We could not do that before. So you and I need to celebrate that that has been achieved. The fact that we've not done as much as you and I would like us to have done is in part down to the fact that 2 months after that historic moment at 11 p.m. on the 31st of January 2020, we were hit by the Chinese plague, COVID. And of course, that distracted every government minister. So what we would like to have done now, having got through that, is to have taken advantage even more than we did. And let us not forget that trade deals were signed around the world. We signed a very important arrangement with Australia and the United States to build a new submarine for Australia. It's called AUKUS. We were able to do all of that. We're freed. We're liberated. We've been unleashed from the shackles of that offensive flag, which I see waving in front.
Can I just ask you, though, I mean, it's such a complicated story to unpick because it's all about sequencing. I think Theresa May fell into the trap of abiding by the sequencing from the European Union. I think Boris Johnson had the right idea. And then, of course, his judgment got impaired with COVID because he was so severely ill and all the rest of it. Just in terms of that, this was always going to be a much longer term plan. I think one of the problems has been Boris Johnson's telling the electorate we've got an oven-ready deal. They didn't have an oven-ready deal, did they?
No, I think that is absolutely right to say we had an oven-ready deal implied. I think that we had a complete set of policies able to be put in place on the 1st of February 2020. Which was, of course, not the case. And there were mistakes made. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. We should have been able to do more. I think that our problem was that Boris and his fellow ministers were in thrall to the medical, not the medical profession, but the publicly paid medical people who made decisions about our lives, which affected the private sector in their pockets, but did not affect one iota those who made the decisions. And for the politicians to have rejected the advice of the medical people at the time would have just incurred wrath of the media, who would have said, what do you as politicians know that the medical profession don't know? So no, we have not been able to take as much advantage. And had we had a Conservative government now, we would have been able to do that. The fact is we have a Labour government led by a man who not only voted Remain, don't forget, David, but had the impertinence to tell the British people that they'd got it wrong and that we needed another vote. The man does not even believe in democracy. And therefore, it is unsurprising that he's going to troop off to suck up to Brussels on Monday. The good news is, though, I don't think they want us back. And in their 1950s defunct construct called the European Union. We're out of it. We're free. In fact, we've made some wrong decisions on immigration, that we've let in far too many people lawfully, let alone the wretched boats. But there's more to do getting out of the European Convention on Human Rights so that we can really tackle these people who, a great friend of mine, a former very close supporter of Margaret Thatcher and a great minister, said to me the other day, these are not asylum seekers, they are invaders. We are facing what my mother called in 1967 an alien invasion, and it lies within the power of the British government now to do something about it. We could not do it when we were in the European Union. We can do it now, and we have to make our own politicians accountable.
I mean, so you mentioned the economy there. We can argue about that. It was always going to be a much longer-term plan, this. But also, you are right to point to immigration, because I think that's the frustration that people are seeing. The whole point was we were taking back control of our money, laws and borders. And it seems that we had incredibly porous borders. That was underneath a Conservative Party. And that's legal immigration, as you rightly point out. I think there's one other thing, and it's about the way that this has been sold to the British public, which is about sovereignty and making sure that we make our own laws. We had 6,500 EU laws that were basically retained EU laws shoved onto the statute book that were never repealed. And one of the other things that springs to mind is the role of the ECHR. Surely, and I will ask you this, shouldn't we come out of the ECHR and be free to deport who we want?
Absolutely. I mean, people don't seem to understand. The European Convention on Human Rights was set up in the aftermath of the Second World War. We have just marked, horrifically, the murder of 6 million Jews. And our forebears as politicians, entirely understandably, wanted to do all they possibly could to prevent that tragedy, that appalling atrocity happening again. That's what the ECHR was set up to do. Instead, of course, it took more and more powers to tell us all what to do. It's not fit for purpose. It's beyond itself by date, certainly as far as the United Kingdom is concerned. We are, even under this current government, we are a decent and respectable people. We have a history of democracy in this country. We have a population which has a deep understanding of compassion and looking after those who can't look after themselves. We do not need foreign judges to second guess what our politicians do. It should lie in the power of the British people. And let me just say, David, on the economy, the truth is that, do you remember that those two huge documents that the Bank of England put out? There was one document which had 5 pages of algebraic formulae telling us what ghastly things were going to happen to us if we had the temerity to vote to leave the European Union. Interest rates were going to rocket. Unemployment was going to rocket. House prices were going to, I think, collapse or rocket one way or the other. The fact is, none of that happened, and we are, even today, we are outperforming our European neighbours in terms of the economy. Not outperforming America, but we are outperforming Germany and France in particular. So the Bank of England and the Treasury did a disreputable job trying to persuade the British people not to vote for to leave the European Union, and all their dire warnings of disaster to come about never ever happened. They betrayed their duty to the British people, and they did betray the British people. But fortunately, we celebrate. The British people gave them the traditional sign of the British archer to the French in the battles of the 14th and 15th. And Winston Churchill, of course, reminded us of that famous salute, except that it was the other way around.
Thank you, Gerald. It's very early on a Saturday morning for that. Just in terms of this, you and I agree this is always going to be a process. It's going to be a long journey, because essentially you're breaking ties of 47 years where we're so entrenched in the European Union that extrication is always going to be difficult. How much of this, though, is a communication problem? All I hear is the doomsayers, oh, Brexit's been a failure, particularly from the metropolitan liberal elite, saying, oh, we need to go back in. I've seen Peter Mandelson going on about it over the last few days. You've got Guy Verhofstadt also saying the Brexit experiment has failed. Surely what is needed is a communication document to the public to say, actually, this has been the success of Brexit. Is that something that's missing?
It is entirely missing, and I was intrigued to see in David Frost's article, Lord Frost, as I should call him, Lord Frost's article in the Telegraph yesterday. He has acknowledged this, and he has said, basically, watch this space. We're going to take action on this front. I sent him a text yesterday saying, absolutely right. We have been, to a certain extent, a bit complacent. We have not recognised that there is a serious risk that the Remoaners just simply won't give up. They are not satisfied with the verdict of the British people. They are arrogant. They think they know best. And it is up to us to make some of the points that Lord Frost made yesterday, and indeed Nigel Farage made in his article yesterday. You know, you're absolutely right about sovereignty. Sovereignty is at the heart of it. We are a sovereign people, and the European Union, its whole purpose was to try to replace us. I mean, it's not rocket science. They have a flag, they have an anthem, they have a parliament, Mickey Mouse Parliament, true, although of course you served in it.
I did, yes.
But it's still a Mickey Mouse Parliament, forgive me.
Very kind.
They've got a president. These are all the attributes of a nation state. They were seeking to subordinate us.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's absolutely no surprise to know they're moving towards a federal Europe. That's what you want. You're also seeing other countries saying, hang on a minute, the Brits got it right. Just let me finish, if I may, Sir Gerald, because I'm sure you've got tea and toast to go to. Let me just finish by asking you, how worried are you about the Labour government and Starmer cozying up to the EU? He says we're not going to rejoin the single market, the customs union, and so on. Do you believe him?
I don't. No, I think that his past actions indicate exactly where his real allegiance lies. I mean, he is an international human rights lawyer. He and his Attorney General, about whom I think there are very, very serious question marks. They seem to elevate their concern about international issues above the concerns of the British people. And I think we're all right to be deeply sceptical, to fear that they might cozy up. And there is one area where they might well try to cozy up, which is on defence. As a defence minister responsible for our relations with the European Union, I saw what they were trying to do. They were trying to undermine NATO. And this European defence identity, as they call it, is simply an attempt to put a brass plate in Brussels which says EU Defence Ministry, because it's all part of creating the United States of Europe as a country. And it is profoundly dangerous. It is only the war in Ukraine which has put this project on hold. But we need to be very careful, and I do remind my son-in-law, James Cartledge, who's an excellent seriously good defence, was a seriously good defence minister, now Shadow Secretary of State for Defence. I warn him, do not allow us to be suckered into some European defence project. By all means, cooperate. We've cooperated with our European neighbours for decades on defence, but do not make this an institution which will threaten NATO, because it's NATO which has kept the peace in Europe for the last nearly 80 years.
Sir Gerald, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for your time. Can I also say what a splendid tie that is? And I look forward to catching up in sunny Suffolk. That's Sir Gerald Howarth, their former Conservative MP, Defence Minister, and he was also on the board of Leave Means Leave.